Chris Yannick, CYInterview, covering Las Vegas and the world. It's Wednesday evening. Tomorrow is the official first round beginning of the NCAA tournament, the 2026 NCAA tournament. And who better to talk with? First off, the former president of CBS Productions. Of course, he also played for the great John Wooden, won multiple championships at UCLA, former basketball player and great entertainment executive, Andy Hill. Andy, it's always great to have you on CYInterview.
Well, great to be with you, Chris. And it's always exciting this time of year with March Madness coming on.
We'll be talking about the Bruins in a couple minutes. And also with us today, he does college football, but he also does college sports in general. Lane Fobbs, of course, the editor of Bearcat Bites. Find him, of course, at Bearcat Bites on X. Lane Fobbs. Lane, thanks so much, as always, for being here.
Hey, anytime. You know, like I said, it's usually college football, but I'm in the building with two legends right now. That really gets to happen to me. So for you guys, I made an exception. No, I'm just kidding. I love March Madness. No, not that part. I was kidding about not liking college basketball as much.
I know. Okay, so let me start with Andy. What does this time of year mean to you, and thoughts on the Bruins team this year?
Well, you know, it's always exciting. It's an interesting event because it's such an American event. You know, the only thing we seem to be able to do together anymore is sports. We seem so divided, but you know, now we're going to have teams from all over the country, play teams from all over the country. And I've been to a lot of these. And, you know, it's a wonderful fan experience. People get along. It's a celebration. The bands play, the cheerleaders dance. And, you know, at the end of it all, you're left with the best team in the country. And, you know, the other thing I think that college basketball has always sort of held out is you're getting best effort. This is one and done. This is a dream of a lifetime that goes away instantly. And I think it's always, in a world where everything seems fake with AI and computer graphics and everything is, you know, take 7. This isn't take 7. This is take 1. So when you see those kids crying on the bench, it's real. And you know it's real. And the joy you see in the locker room isn't put on, and there is no take 2. And so it's really unique and exciting. And, you know, thank God for sports so we can kind of get our mind off what everything else is going on.
I have one question before we throw it to Lane, and I know Lane's going to have some things for Andy as well, but I have a question for you. I'm sure you were, but I just need to verify. You were president of CBS Productions when they had the NCAA tournament, correct? And is that right? Did I get that?
Yes, correct.
What do you remember about that time, about how they used to show the tournament compared to today?
Well, you know, sports didn't report to me, Chris. I was doing the entertainment shows. I mean,
Gotcha,
I remember,
okay.
But I'll tell you what I remember. What I remember in 1995, my last year at CBS, my friend Harry Thomason, who had an airplane leasing company, you may remember Travelgate. Harry said, you know, if you get us a couple of tickets, let's fly up to the game. Well, I worked at CBS, so that wasn't that hard. And I get to the little airport, you know, flying private. I'll never get used to that. That's slick, man. You pull up, you know, they just open the door, you get on the plane. I get on the plane, and I swear to God, there are 6 people with pig noses on them. I'm getting on the plane with all Arkansas people. It's like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? We fly up for the game, and Tyus isn't playing. And I thought, oh, this is going to be bad. I called my assistant in LA and said, can you get me on an earlier flight out? You know, I don't want to fly home with these people. And she tried, she couldn't get me out. So I sat through the game. What a great game. You know, Cameron Dollar came in and made things happen, and the Bruins won, and it was one of the great flights home of all time. And I put on the pig nose.
Well said. Well said. Lane, I have to ask you, you know, we both have covered sports for a long time and filling out the bracket and all that stuff. Obviously, you know, I love both. I love basketball and football evenly. But, like, what does this time of year mean to you?
You know, it's funny. First off, I told my wife before I jumped on tomorrow, and it's statistically proven. You all, Andy Diddley might know this. it is the least productive day in America. Tomorrow and Friday, our least productive days at work, because everyone's watching the tournament. If you don't believe that, I remember, and I don't know if you all remember this, a few years ago, they had like a screensaver or something you could have on your computer that looked like an Excel spreadsheet. It was called the boss screen. And you could just pull that up until whoever walked by needed to keep watching your game. That is what it means to me. It is such a unique time on our sports calendar. The only other time when me being younger, I accessed the tournament watching it during PE when I was in middle school. So I'm dating myself a bit. It's like, 2001, 02, all of these things. They would roll that card in there, cut it on. All right, sit there. This is sports. And it was one of those rare times. It was really cool where something you normally have to stay up late to watch and enjoy. It's on right there. Tomorrow, Friday, this is one of the definitely top 3, I'd say, greatest weekends in sports because of that. The upsets. I love the upsets. Whenever I pick my bracket, I always, that's my rule. Every 12, I pick them to beat that 5. At least one's going to do it. At least one will do it, And that's the fun thing, too. When you're filling out the brackets, the different rules, the different guidelines everybody uses, the coaches, a lady might pick somebody because the coach is cute, and off they go, this random team, so suddenly she's the office winner. I love that. My other rule, always bet on Tom Izzo in March. I do that as well. So that's what it means to me. Just a lot of fun. And then even beyond that, we all have been blessed to cross paths with different people in life. They all go to different schools, people they know. All of the schools, we know somebody that went to at least one of them, If you don't believe that, by the way, shout out to Prairie View A&M winning their first ever tournament game in the first 4. Prairie View is a family school of mine, being based here in Texas. Shout out to the University of Texas, even though I'm an Aggie. They won. SMU's trying to do it right now as our recording, but we'll see. I like seeing that, dividing them by state. There's just so many elements, and it brings it together in a way that other sporting events don't.
Andy, thoughts? I think he captured it pretty well.
It's unique.
Andy.
It's unique, Chris, and I think that's what we're both really. There's nothing like it, and the regional excitement. I do sort of feel bad when I see teams on one coast flying to the other coast. I mean, there used to be like a West Regional and a South Regional, and it was actually the teams from the West. I mean, now it's just somehow how they, Joe Lunardi figures where to send them, I guess. But there was more of a regional flavor to it in the old days. But it's still, and this is what makes it unique, it's 1 and out. There are no second chances. It's no 4 out of 7. It's no 2 out of 3. It's give me your best shot. Last man standing.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. How did John prepare you guys for the tournament? Like, what was the preparation for postseason like for him? And was it any different than a regular season game?
Well, there you go. No, it was the latter. It's a game. It's another game. We've been playing these all year. I mean, I think that for a lot of people, they build it up to such a degree that, teams come out and play tight. And, the other thing is, keep in mind, Chris, every game we played was a circus. We were like the Rolling Stones. When we went on the road, it was a big game every night. Paulie was sold out every night. I mean, I take my grandson to the games, and 2 or 3 games a year they sell out. I say, this is what it was like every night. He's like, really? Every night? Yeah, every night. Every night. It's Bruin basketball, baby. But, I think the Bruins got a puncher's chance like a lot of other teams do. When you put in the 3-point line, anybody can beat anybody on a given night. There really is. I mean, 16 seeds can come in and win if they get hot. Because the truth of it is you got a 16 going against a 1, and that 1 seed gets down 4 points, 6 points, and all of a sudden, boy, it gets tight. The pressure flips to the other side pretty fast. So those upsets that I think really do kind of spark the first couple or 3 rounds of the tournament are really defined by the upsets of these kids who can't believe they're, dancing. And, here they are upsetting somebody on national TV, and oftentimes, and I'm sure this is still true. I mean, these guys from these small schools, they've been watching basketball all year long. They know who the Boozer brothers are. They know who DeBonsa is. These guys are big names, and, they show up with stars in their eyes and desperation in their heart because they want to beat them. They want to make a memory for a lifetime, and that's what it is.
What do you think it is, and then I'll throw it back to Lane, what do you think it is about the NCAA tournament that captures the emotion of people, I think, in a way it doesn't with other sports?
Who are you tossing that to, Chris?
That's to you, Andy.
Oh, well, gee, I didn't even listen because I thought it wasn't for me. Now, honestly, I just think it is. Listen, the college football, they're 10 teams. There really aren't 60 good college football teams, but you only need, to be fair, you need 10, 12 guys to have a basketball team. You need, give me a minimum number, 75 guys to have a competitive Division I football team. It's a lot of guys. So basketball really gives you that opportunity. And then the other thing is that, there's that thing about getting hot in basketball. It doesn't really quite happen in any other sports. You hit a couple shots and all of a sudden that basket looks like it's 10 feet wide. And like I say, when you're the underdog, you got no pressure. When you're the favorite. And keep in mind, back in the day when I was playing basketball, we didn't know the spread. Now these kids know the prop bets. I mean, this is all craziness now, but the NIL and the portal and the gambling and, I barely recognize it, to be honest. I don't like it as much as I used to because of that. It's lost all of its innocence. And, when you got players making $6, $7, $8 million a year playing college basketball, kind of different rooting for them. I don't know. I always love rooting for the kids, but when a guy's making $8 million, I feel like I ought to boo him if he doesn't play good.
Very good. Well said. Lane, thoughts on this year's tournament, any of the other teams, and anything you'd like to ask Andy more that way? Go ahead.
Well, when you're talking about NIL and things, and you could, I would like your thoughts on this, Andy, actually, because I had this thought today, prepping for this. The upset question, to me, just even a few years ago, there used to be a lot more upsets because what was happening? You had those teams like Fairleigh Dickinson, Oakland, all these teams that would upset Kentucky and all these guys. They had played for years together, 4 years. Those were seniors versus, the best players, that Kentucky happened to have. But now, and they talked about it last year, how there were fewer upsets, but that I'm really interested in seeing it this year and, subsequent years. How many upsets are we going to have? Are we going to keep having, enough of them to make it fun like that from that standpoint? Because now, because of NIL and the transfer portal, it's pretty much, all this talent, these guys who happen to be here together versus not as talented, these guys happen to be here together. So it kind of makes it where, the upset's a little more difficult. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. I think you absolutely hit on something that, people are going to start to kind of get a sense of. I mean, those guys from the mid-majors who have a good tournament, what that means is, hey, jump in the portal, there's money out there. Right. And the other point that you bring up, quite frankly, that I think has hurt college basketball is it helps to play together for years. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I'm sure they do this at a lot of college programs, but on the rare chance that I go to a UCLA basketball practice, they hand you a program when you get there. I never needed a program for UCLA basketball. Now he got 8 new guys from the portal. I don't know who these guys are. And the other part of it is, I'm old, fellas. I'm 75 years old. And, part of what's fun about watching college is watching these boys turn into men, watching Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell, grow and overcome. And I can tell you those guys are going to be friends for life. And I think that's one of the things that I really kind of sense is the friendships forged in the heat of battle are like nothing else you have in your life. And my closest friends are not my friends from the entertainment business. They're friends from college. And not just guys I played with, but guys who played for a coach, because we've all been through the program. So, you break through generations. I mean, Mike Warren, Lucius Allen, they're best buddies. But they were also my heroes, and they were guys that you got to see play for years. And I miss that. I really do. I miss that sense of watching young men grow up. Obviously, they needed to get paid. I think it's pathetic that the NCAA just kind of sat it all out and waited for it to explode. And now it's like Thelma and Louise driving towards a cliff. I mean, I always kind of felt what they ought to do is put $250,000 a year into an escrow account. And when you get your diploma, you get $1 million, and make the money. Because let's be clear on something. For the guys who go to college and then go on to play professional sports, they got what they came to college for, right? They're making bank. If you could go from college to professional football or professional basketball, you're on your road to being a very rich young man. Doesn't matter if you got paid playing at college. You got a college degree. You got everything paid for. But for the guy who goes to school, gets through school, gets a degree, and isn't going on, to me, they should, your financial reward should be attached to what theoretically the end goal is. That I want to see you get that diploma. Because I got to tell you, you get that diploma, and I want to be the coach greeting you walking off that stage with that check for $1 million. See, that makes sense to me. That's college sports. But
what were the graduation rates when you were with Coach? I'm sure they were almost 100%. No?
How about everybody?
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah. I mean, Coach said it was everybody. I never went and checked the registrar's office, but he was pretty reliable, and he said it was everybody. And but those days are gone. But to me, the NCAA is just a pathetic organization that has been corrupt from the very beginning and has never really had the best interests of the student athletes in mind. I'm heartbroken, to be honest, that the Bruins are in the Big Ten. I like the Pac-12. To see these kids who, by the way, excuse me, are going to college. I mean, maybe not at all these schools, but if you want to go to UCLA, man, I couldn't get in there anymore. Every kid who's in that class with you got a 4 or 5 in high school. They didn't get in. Man, you got to go. You got to go to class. You got to study. And knowing how much time these kids are, A, on airplanes, and B, how many time zones they're going through, it's all about the money. It's the money. And, at the end of the day, it seems like that's all we care about is the money. I mean, you have an analogous situation, by the way, in the NBA. I have no doubt in my mind that the NBA should take the Clippers away from Steve Ballmer. Period. Over and out. He clearly violated things in this Kawhi Leonard deal. You can't fine him. Fine him $20 million that falls out of his pocket after breakfast. So what can you do? Take draft choices away? from a major market franchise, you're now going to turn them into a crappy team? Well, you don't care about the sport. You don't care about the fans. All you care about is the money. Steve Ballmer's the richest owner in the league. This should be simple. You must sell the team. They made Nick Maletti sell a team. They made Donald Sterling sell a team. And by the way, this poor guy, when he sells a team, is only going to make $1 billion.
Yeah.
And they're going to go take draft choices away from the Clippers, who've been crappy forever, so they will be crappy forevermore. And, once again, it's because everybody's worried about the Benjamins.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. Before we get on to Coach Wooden and the great Bill Walton, I want some Bill Walton stories. I've got a couple of questions. But what's your favorite NCAA tournament moment from your time at UCLA with Coach?
My favorite NCAA tournament moment had to be when it was all over. I did not enjoy my time. I got to be perfectly honest. I look back on it now, and I cannot believe I couldn't find a way to have a better time with it. But sticking it out, sitting on the bench for 3 years, it wasn't fun. And when it was all over and we'd finally won, and that was, Bill's sophomore year, we'd gone 30-0, and our average margin of victory was over 30 points a game, still an NCAA record. That was a fun team to watch. That was high speed, beautiful basketball. And, I had the best seat in the house. I guess if I could tell you one story from that tournament, give you some idea of my career. I did set my career record. I got 10 points against Boise State in the finals of the regional in 2.5 minutes. I told Coach, if he'd given me 40, I would have gotten 100. He didn't think it was funny. I thought it was a pretty good line, really. I mean, well, what the heck, right? But we're playing Louisville in the semis. Denny Crum was their coach, and Denny had been our coach at UCLA. And Denny was one of the great trash talkers of all time, and, that was kind of my thing, too. So, Denny and I get into it, and we're running out the clock. If I'm in, the game's kind of over. And I got fouled a second time. And Denny stands up and yells at the guy. And it's, every once in a while in these arenas, it kind of goes quiet. And so everybody could hear him. And Denny and I used to shoot a lot before practice. And I couldn't do much, but I could shoot. And he yelled at the guy. He said, "I said anybody but him." That was sort of my career highlight.
Here's what I'm going to say to you in this regard. Here's what I'm going to ask you. How often do you look at the rings?
I don't have any of them. I gave them all away.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I gave them all away to different people.
Wow.
My son, I gave one of them away. I played basketball in Israel when I graduated, and there was a guy who was like the team manager, and I gave one to him. And, it's just, I'm not a jewelry guy. I've been married 52 years. I don't have a wedding ring either. I don't much like wearing that stuff, so it was fine to give them away. And I've got the memories. And the memories can't be replaced. I mean, you mentioned Bill earlier. I mean, wow, that I got to be best friends with Bill Walton. How cool is that? Because when you've experienced him for 2 minutes, you know who he is. He's just who you thought he was. That's kind of what was so cool about Coach Wooden, too, by the way, I spoke motivationally for years, and people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Andy, you've got to hear this story," right? Because they either ran into Bill or Coach. And they had to tell me this story about how nice they were, how attentive they were. And it was all under, "You won't believe this," right? And it's like, do you know how many times I've heard this story? The same story, the exact same story. But the truth is, I loved hearing it because I love knowing that's who these guys were. They understood that every interaction they had with a fan was an opportunity to make make a friend and make somebody a fan of the game. And that's the way they were their whole life. I mean, Bill, when the games were over at UCLA, we used to go out to dinner whenever he covered the games at UCLA. And he stayed after every game and signed autographs for 45 minutes. And, people are funny. I don't know why they would do this. A lot of time people would think it was appropriate to tell me, knowing that I was Bill's best friend, how much they hated Bill on the broadcast, which I always found strange. I mean, find somebody else to tell it, but I always say to them, well, you may not like him, but have you seen any of these other color guys sitting here for 45 minutes signing autographs? I don't think so. And everybody he signed an autograph for got a story and, take your hat off and, where are you from? And it just, he was one of one and one of one as a player too. I mean, the what you're seeing today in many ways is the evolution of guys like Bill, but guys who had so many different levels of skills, where we went from kind of the low post guy who stayed in the post and you threw it into him close to the basket, to, big guys being part of the movement, part of the passing and the cutting. And, then you put in a guy like Joker who's taken it to just a whole other level. But you can, I can see these guys in what they do. You can see the breadcrumbs from these guys. And it is amazing to me. Think about it. 10 championships in 12 years. 7 in a row.
Yeah.
It's just stunning. It's mind-boggling. This little old farmer from Indiana. How the heck did he do it? And by the way, he did it without swearing at anybody. How about that?
Let me just say this to you. I have one question. I'm going to throw it to Lane about Bill. Was he always interested in the world beyond basketball? And did he always use those references? One minute he could be talking about how does Mount Everest relate to what we're talking about right now, but somehow it does.
I have a confession to make, Chris. I was guilty for more than a few of Bill's more outrageous utterings on his broadcasts. We would talk every morning for a half an hour. It's part of why I miss him so much. I mean, the world is insane. And the guy that I used to talk to about it every day is gone. But my favorite example of this, you fellas may be a little young for this. You remember there was a senator up, I think, in Idaho named Larry Craig, got caught in the bathroom of the air.
That was about 20 years ago.
About 20 years ago, right? Kind of what he called a wide stance so that he could kind of reach into either stall on either side of him. And, we thought it was pretty funny. So I kind of double dog dared Bill to work it into his broadcast that night, and when he did, I thought, "Oh my God, I was just kidding."
Unbelievable!
Down in a wide stance.
You had to have known he was going to try that. You had to have known.
Well, okay, you got me.
Don't do it.
Did he get reprimanded for that?
Pardon me?
He get reprimanded for that?
No. I think ultimately the guys realized Bill was a unique talent, and you just had to let him go. And, he would be talking about, when he would do the UCLA games, he'd talk about my grandson in high school, who didn't even play basketball. He'd just talk. And, I became pretty good buddies with all of his broadcast partners, who were all, Dave Pash and Roxy Bernstein and really good guys. And, hanging on to Bill in a broadcast was a talent all of its own making, because he wouldn't talk to him before the broadcast. I don't want to use up my good stuff. But when people thought he was just making this stuff up, he showed up with more notes than any broadcaster you've ever seen. He just sounded like he was making it up. And in fact, Bill has passed, so I'm going to tell you something that could disappoint people who are Bill Walton fans all over America. He didn't smoke pot for like the last 10 years of his life. I said, Bill, don't tell anybody, because your fans will be so disappointed to think that you're this crazy and you're not high will be very disappointing to them. Keep the myth alive, baby.
My God.
Come on, you ever see him eat the candle with Dave? I mean, it's like, what are you doing? Huh?
I thought so he wasn't high when he did that?
No, and I
that's insane to me.
Don't tell anybody.
Was he the biggest Grateful Dead fan ever? Was that really true, Andy?
Yes, I suspect it was part of what Bill and I bonded over. I was the first guy who really met Bill at UCLA. Bill was 16. They were recruiting his brother Bruce, who was an offensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys. And so they said, well, will you take this kid, Bill Walton? Now, fellas, you're too young. This is pre-internet. There's no internet. So it's like, I've never heard of Bill Walton. They say, we think he's pretty good. So he's 16 years old, and I'm taking him out to dinner and a Laker game. So we go to this restaurant called the Bat Rack. Bill told me later it was the first time he had ever been in a restaurant with a tablecloth. Now, I mean, he was so unsophisticated, guys, I don't know how to tell you. So they bring, like in all these places, they bring you this big menu, right? It's like 40 pages long, right? And he's looking through this, and I can tell he's really uncomfortable and stuttering so bad because, of course, he was nervous, and he didn't know me. And finally, the waiter comes over to, what do you have? And he said, I'll have a hamburger. And I said, no. You'll see why Bill and I became best friends. I turned to the waiter, and I realized in hindsight, I was just a couple years older than him. But when you're 16 and the guy's 18, that guy's like James Bond, right? I mean, I'm like the most sophisticated guy he's ever met. So I turned to the waiter, and I said, what's the biggest steak you have on your menu? He says, well, we got a 32-ounce porterhouse. I said, that's what he'll have. And we were best friends ever since.
Oh, that's lovely. Lane, any thoughts? Anything you'd like to say? Go ahead.
As someone who grew up watching Bill Walton, so for me, that's where I picked up with him. Going back to what was that NBA when it went to ABC? Remember, he was on there. I feel like, obviously when he went to the college game, I feel like that is when they allowed him to spread out as a broadcaster. That's when I really got to enjoy it. Like I said, I'm much more college football, but during those Pac-12 games, let me tell you something. If him and Pat were on there, I was making time to watch that. I was making time. I was November birthday. He's 2 days after mine, so I have a soft spot for my fellow Scorpios. And just the other thing for him to celebrate the Pac-12 conference the way he did, the Conference of Champions, beautiful basketball, poetry on the court, and then they would take him out.
No truck stops here.
Exactly.
And you know what I'd say? Have you been to Corvallis, Bill?
Right. and funny enough, I went to Corvallis for the first time last year.
Lane was just in Corvallis covering Sam Houston when they played up there and won, actually. So he was just at Oregon State earlier last year.
Mm-hmm. I just was. And, recently it's sorry?
I said that's a truck stop, like Pullman. Bill always used to say no truck stops in the Pac-12, but it was a lie.
And I didn't realize how much it was, how much of that truck stop it was. So I landed in Portland. I actually drove. So I drove past all the grass factories. I'm like, oh, this is where America's grass is growing. Okay, this is great.
About that, huh?
Yeah. And so, but just even my familiarity with that was all because of Bill. A friend of mine, I'm from Houston, went to Texas A&M. He ended up working in the Bay Area. He has a job out there, so I ended up going. We took in a Cal game for football. True story. I saw Cal's last Pac-12 home football game against Washington State. Fernando Mendoza versus Cam Ward.
Right.
Yeah, two future Heisman guys.
Here, check this out. It's a Bill Walton shirt.
Gotta get it back. Gotta get back. There you go. Yeah, yep, I can see that. Sure.
I got my 32 on there. This was actually classic Bill. He calls me, he says, what size shirt do you wear? I said, I'm an extra large. He said, okay, I'm going to send you one. Next day, a box arrives with 20 shirts in it. That's Bill. I had one time a buddy ask me, his kid owned a restaurant in Ann Arbor called the Big Ten Burrito, and they loved Bill. They thought he was really funny, so he said, "Could you send me an 8x10 glossy?" So I called Bill. I said, told him the story. A box shows up at my house with a jersey, right, which is huge, of course. It's a Walton jersey, a basketball, five pictures. Cost this guy $2,000 to frame all this stuff. But that's Bill, just, the most generous guy you could ever meet. And we miss him. We miss him.
I don't want to get, I'm not trying to get political here on the next one, Andy, so please bear that in mind. But what do you think, Coach Wooden would say to people about the world today?
I think he'd be sad. John Wooden was a good Christian man. And there are a lot of pretend Christians in the world today who talk a lot about being Christians, but all you hear that comes out of their mouth is hate. It's a religion of love. And I think at the end of the day, that's where he would come out.
Fair enough. Lane,
is that vague and specific enough for you, Chris?
I think that was good. Lane, anything else you'd like to add with Andy before we wrap up?
My first radio job, the guy in the sales department, Sam Jones was his name. He told me, he's like, I'm old enough. I remember the first college basketball game was nationally broadcast. He said it was in the Astrodome, UCLA in Houston. Were you were there for that game? If I'm correct, or that's the thing I'm going.
That was the Kareem game that they lost. We did play in the Astrodome. We won a national championship in the Astrodome. We beat Kansas and Dave Robish in the Astrodome. But that first game was Kareem and Elvin Hayes. And I was watching on TV. And then, if you remember, they had a rematch in the national semifinals, and UCLA blew them out. And I was already enrolled at UCLA. I was the only guy on campus because I had graduated mid-semester. And there were 6 recruits at the game. And they were pretty sure they were going to get 5 of them. They thought they were going to get all of them except for this kid, Henry Bibby from North Carolina. And so, of course, the only one they got was Henry Bibby from North Carolina. And I played behind Henry for 3 years. But still a great, great friend and great memories. And listen, guys, have fun. Let's have a good tournament. Let's have some close games, so upsets and, a couple of beers and have a good time.
Well, the one thing I want to close with, Andy, and we don't talk about this enough, but we should always, in every CY interview we have with you, college basketball goes behind you. You go on to become the president of CBS Productions, and you have the first evening of one night, #1 television across the board. Walker, Texas Ranger, Touched by an Angel, and Dr. Quinn Medicine. The first time in broadcast television history that any person, you oversaw all of that. What does that mean looking back?
Wow, Chris, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. Let me just pull it back around in a way. When I finally decided I wanted to go back and see Coach, this is a guy I hadn't seen in 25 years. And in a way, those shows gave me the courage to go back and see him because I knew those shows were for him. And he loved them. That was his favorite night of TV. He loved all those shows. And so, in a way, they helped open up the door back into my friendships with UCLA. And of course, the friendship I developed with Coach, which was indescribable, Chris. I still, thank God I picked up the phone and called him. It was the hardest call I ever made in my life. But what a blessing. I'm so lucky. And I'm so lucky he was there and picked it up because I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I would have left him a message.
Didn't you guys used to get together like one time a week with him also at some point? Am I right about
that? We used to go to Vips all the time. In fact, I'll tell you what, Chris, when I get off, I'll text you a picture from last week at Vips. I was there with Mike, Lucius, and Jamal. And all the same waiters, the same owner. They were so excited to see us. I mean, Coach just filled their life with so much purpose and happiness, I can't tell you. But it was also so him. I mean, he knew everybody in there, and he'd go down the line at the counter and say hi to everybody. And he just made that place special. And it was the first time I had ever been back since he passed. And it was interesting. A lot of memories, a lot of really sweet memories.
Well, thank you as always, Andy and Lane. Thanks you guys both for being here. Lane, final thoughts on the NCAA tournament?
It's going to be fun. Look to see if UH is the number 2 seed is playing that regional, the South Regional in the Toyota Center. Florida is number 1, so let's kind of see how that plays out. That's what I'm most interested.
I'm a University of Florida grad.
I already know.
I'm sorry for 05. I apologize for 05. I think you were there at 05. Were you there at the game in 05 or no? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks for reminding me. I appreciate it.
I'm sorry about that.
Don't rub it in, Come on.
I'm not trying to rub. I'm so grateful you're here. You don't have an idea how much it means to me that you're here. So
Hey, Chris, call me anytime. I love John Wooden, and I know you guys speak to a younger audience than I connect with.
No, I know.
And these people need to know who Coach was.
I love Coach.
There's a level of lack of information that is kind of frightening. And, to say you're a huge basketball fan and say, gee, who John Wooden, who's he? It's like, no, you're not a huge basketball fan.
Well, the last thing I'm going to tell you made me sit there and remember, and Lane doesn't know this, but years ago, you did a panel with the late, great Coach Mike Leach, who was my coach, as you know.
Right.
They were on a panel together years ago with me, and it's just so sad because I used to, he was so in tune with everything we were doing, and he was like Bill Walton. He's just one of these amazing people where you could always bounce something off of, and he's no longer here. And I feel the same way you do about, losing Coach Wooden. You know what I'm saying about Mike not being able to send a text to Mike anytime I wanted to mention something to him. It's very hard, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, hold it in your heart that you were lucky to know him. I mean, really, I look at myself and think to myself, how did I get to know these guys like this? I mean, crazy, absolutely crazy. And
I was also fortunate to have 2 interviews with Pat Summitt while she was alive. She was the female John Wooden,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, these people have so much to contribute, and particularly for someone like Coach, who managed to coach people without abusing them, because I think that's become far too prevalent in coaching. You can't abuse people in any workplace, but seemingly for some reason in the basketball or football environment. That kind of abuse is no longer legal in America, anywhere. And if indeed young people learn a lot from their coach, and as Exhibit A, I'd say, boy, I learned everything I know from my coach, then why don't we teach them how to discipline and give feedback without using profanity and without looking like you want to kill that other person? Because you can't do that anywhere. And if you take those lessons that you got from your coach, your revered coach who's won all these games and makes all this money and people think he's great, and so somebody screws up the 3rd day on the job, and you take him out back and start screaming at him, security's going to pull you out of the building. And I don't understand. Look, you look at the way they talk to the referees. The NBA refs take a lot less guff than the NCAA refs. Why?
I agree with that.
Makes sense. So, I think what Coach understood was he was raising young men. He used that great Amos Alonzo Stagg story where after he won 10 games, the coach said, is this your best team ever? And Coach said, I don't know, come back in 20 years. I'll give you an answer. Because that's really what these sports are about. They're wonderful entertainment and everything else. But, they teach you so much that can be useful to young people in life about discipline and teamwork and commitment. Things that There's nobody in the world that doesn't need people in their workforce that have all those qualities. And in fact, and athletes do have one advantage, one big advantage, which is they have taken harsh criticism. You know, most young people have not taken any harsh criticism. Nobody's ever yelled at them. So it's tough in the workplace. You get somebody come into your program, come into your workplace who's been an athlete. I don't know if you've seen the statistics on women in the C-suite, the women with big jobs. They all played sports. It's like 85% of them played sports because, it gave them those tools. And basketball certainly, to me, is the best sport for that. Football, they come back, have a huddle after every play. That's not life, baby. You don't get to huddle up after play.
Well, if we continue this, Andy, we'll be here till the Final Four. So thank you so very much, Lane Fobbs.
I told you, Chris, we'd fill up some time, baby.
No, I know. I love it. I could just go with you for hours, so you know that. I love you guys. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks, fellas.
Hang on.
I love this. Honored to be on here with you guys. We'll see y'all.